Friends, I invite you into these moments of meditation. Sensing your breath in and out as the flowing air that invites deep peace. The peace that holds us truer into our holy wholeness. Breathing in, come home to the peace that is your true home. Breathing out, share that peace. And let the rolling waves of sound and silence as Pete gently plays the piano invite you to pay attention to the rolling waves of your own breath in and out. Trusting that there is nothing you need to do. But to breathe in this moment all that it holds just as it is. Peace above me, peace below, peace before me, behind me, to my right, to my left, peace within me. Let all around me, within me, be peace. And when you're ready, let that rolling wave of your breath deepen as you inhale and exhale and arrive back here in this sacred place together. Thanks, Pete. Well, Well, the printer didn't work. So I have my laptop to kind of keep me a little bit grounded because I have a three-stranded braid of a talk today. So this will help me keep those strands straight in my heart and in my mouth. And if not, then we're just going to see where the braid takes us. But I do have a couple of visual aids with me this morning as well. I had 3 volunteer tulips in my yard. I planted tulips a couple of years ago, and I'm pretty sure the squirrels in my neighborhood have deposited them elsewhere. But the sacred got tended itself, and here are 3 little volunteer tulips that I thought to share with us. I also have a photo from my time a few years ago in Scotland when I had the gift of really landing in that Celtic spirituality that is part of my ancestry and part of my ongoing spiritual journey. I have my spiral necklace to remind me of the spiraling in and the spiraling out. Today is World Labyrinth Day. You might not have known that, but it's World Labyrinth Day. And I have the calling in labyrinth that I did when I called you into me that I meant to bring last week. So I have that here today, this time of retreat in my own house, that winter of 2021, when despair sent me inward. Thank you for despair as a way to tend the sacred calling forth. So today in Celtic spirituality, well, Friday was officially the day, but it's Beltane, Belatiania. Tried to figure out how to say it with more of a Gaelic pronunciation. I probably butchered that. One of the things about the turning of the year in Celtic spirituality is we come to these quarter days, and Beltane is a quarter day. And in the ancient ways that this was celebrated across Ireland and Scotland, it was marked by ritually extinguishing all of the hearth fires that had burned through the darkness of winter. So while Beltane is a festival of fire, it first involved extinguishing the old, the fires that had sustained families through the dark nights of winter were put out. And then the hearth fires were relit from a common fire, so that each fire that burned then in the hearth as they welcomed in the days of warming weather, of new life and green growth, were refreshed by a new fire. So there's in this festival, in this ritual, a letting go and a calling in. And in Celtic spirituality and Celtic teaching, there's that idea of the thin space, the liminal space. I'm going to talk a little bit more about that. It's that time in between when you have one foot in what is letting go and one foot beginning something new, but you're not quite in either. And that can feel like we are off kilter. And the interesting thing about this being World Labyrinth Day is there is also that spiraling in a labyrinth, right? You walk around the path if you're lucky enough to walk a labyrinth. If you draw with crayons in a very unsophisticated way, I recognize the spirals must mean a lot to me because I keep adorning myself with them. That idea of the spiraling in, of what I let go and what I heal and what I have to look at again when I thought, wow, I thought I crossed that one off my list. I thought I'd healed that one well and truly, but now I get a chance to look at it again in that center spot. And maybe I feel a little off kilter in that liminal space. So that's my first strand. That my Celtic roots ground me in this turning of the year, in nature's rhythms, as both teacher and guide, as symbol of my own life, and as kin, right? That kinship with all of creation. My second strand, I'm going to do a little callback to last week where we could not stream. It's been an interesting technology month. But I spoke last week about my newfound appreciation and my own kind of unsettled feeling of Charles Fillmore's teaching and a new way of looking at the theology and wisdom of Myrtle Fillmore that I learned from taking a challenging but wonderful class with Kelly Isla. So I'm not going to redo that whole talk, but I wanted to call back to how Myrtle moves us into practices of care, of paying attention, both to what's going on in our own bodies and in our own lives, and in community. She calls us towards listening to the voice of God within, listening to each other, steeping our lives in gratitude to God as our source. She leans into those ways as pathways to our healing, that we are then in the flow of divine life, and part of our question is looking at what in me is keeping me from feeling that divine flow of life. So again, we have this beautiful wisdom from Charles, whose kind of foundational question that Kelly distills it this way is, how does divine mind, substance, become form, become visible, become material in our lives and in the world? It's a beautiful question. But she also posits that Myrtle asks a question that we also need to pay attention to. And that is, what allows life, healing, and belonging to flow again in us when we have something that is blocking that? I think both of those questions are so important, but right now, with everything that is going on in the world, I feel when I hear that question of Myrtle, what restores life? What restores belonging and healing? That there's something about that question that brings a tear to my eye and a deep yes to my heart. Before I can affirm what I want to see, I need to be grounded in community, in relationship, in the reciprocity of what we build here. So that when I have a day when I know that I'm so flexible I can hardly stand up straight, I am held in community. That's our part of that. But we also live in a world, right? A time when that worldly power, the power of empire, when those worldly powerful few are so rooted in greed and accumulating more and more and more wealth that they have no idea that prosperity is rooted in trusting that God is our source. That those worldly powerful few are so rooted in might makes right as a justification for war, for criminalizing immigrants, our neighbors of color, women, and gender non-conforming folks. That in that worldly power, empathy is seen as a weakness, not as a gift of hearts communing with each other, but as a weakness. Myrtle wrote, God is not far off, doling out good. God is the life within us, the love that is always pouring itself into expression as us. God is our supply. I also, in my own life, really appreciate how she wrote that, do not hurry the Lord's working. As I said last week, I get it in my head that I really want God to hurry things up. Like God is some force outside of me, outside of you, and just dragging its heels, fixing all the ills of the world. Do not hurry the Lord's working, love's working. Life ripens you as the flower opens to the sun, without forcing, without fear. I don't always feel without fear. But when I pray, and again, Myrtle's reminder that prayer helps us come to quietness of mind, a deepening trust on that presence that is alive as love within us and everywhere. So that's the second strand. My third strand is actually a braid within a braid. So can you picture this, right? If you've ever braided hair or braided ribbons, maybe not. Braided a horse's tail. The 3 strands over and over. One of those strands has 3 strands of its own. Because last Sunday, I went to a beautiful half an hour Zoom session with a writer, Caitlin Curtis. She's a poet. She writes on Substack. She's published many books, including some beautiful children's books. And her ancestry, her roots are both Celtic and from the Potawatomi Nation. So she was hosted on through an incredible organization called Alignment, and it's an international interfaith organization that has a wide range. I think they called it, what did they call it? Because I wrote it down. A palette. They provide a palette of programs. I loved that. Wisdom across many, many, many wisdom traditions, shared much of it for free online. And so in this half an hour with Caitlin, she talked about poetry as medicine. Now, I know I love poetry. Some of you hear the word poetry, and it might make you groan, thinking of a high school English class where you had to analyze a poem to its nth degree, and it made you hate poetry. But if you think of poetry as simply the way we tell the stories of ourselves to ourselves and to each other, it gives you that bigger picture. So even if poetry isn't your thing, you have a story of who you are that is your own thing. But Caitlin talked about the medicine of poetry as being first for ourselves, individually. She invited us to think about how we receive ourselves from ourselves. Receive yourself from yourself. How have words, how has your story, how has your presence helped you to receive your truest self from yourself? Not from an outside source, but from deeply going within and feeling the medicine, the healing of knowing yourself. So poetry as medicine for each of us. And then medicine for each other in community. How are we tending to each other? How does your story come into me? How do we make room for each other's stories, and how do we hold those with care? How do we practice listening to each other, to the stories that are out there in the world, and finding at them the heart of what is life asking of us? How are words and stories and poetry and music and art and flowers and presents medicine for each other? And her third braid was so powerful because she talked about poetry as medicine for the earth. That our language, our words, our stories are rooted in place. They're rooted in the places that we have traveled to, the places in our imagination, the places we call home. Our language, our poetry, our stories are rooted in each other. And in that way, we're called then to recognize the sacred all around us, to use our words for power to heal, not power over, but empowering healing. That is medicine for the earth. It is medicine for each other. It is medicine for our own hearts. That's the third strand. Now, as I pull those strands together, I'm going to tell you right now, I've got lots of questions, a handful of practices, and no answers. Not a one. How do you let life ripen, as Myrtle suggests? How do you tend the sacred medicine in yourself, in your own life, in your own heart? How do you tend that in each other, in the world around you? What are you ready to release from those fires that have helped us navigate winter and darkness, even though we know there is still much darkness in the world? What are we ready to let go? What are you ready to ignite as the sacred fire of your own sacred purpose? That's why there's no answers. I cannot tell you what your sacred purpose is. I can only witness your beauty and witness your pain and witness your story and help you in that listening and in that presence come to your own deep truth. I have hope that we are living through a liminal time, that there is so much of the old burning away, literally burning away, in the destruction that is so visible in our country and around the world. And that we are here to help usher in a new way. A way that we put feet and hands to our vision of a world transformed. That in this off-kilter, uncomfortable, liminal space, that asking questions is wise. That practicing stillness or dancing in the fountain of life or singing, praying, those are practices that are wise, that help us listen to that voice of the divine within. In the March and April issue of Spirituality and Health, there's an article called The Sacred Pause, Thriving in Uncertainty. Anybody recognize this as a time of uncertainty? Besides me? Leslie Williams writes, in our culture that's fixated on getting things done, we tend to see life as a bunch of destinations. We treat times between as uncomfortable bridges we need to cross. This was an uncomfortable time of being in one job, not knowing what was next, and it took 6 or 7 months to figure itself out. But we treat times between as uncomfortable bridges we need to cross and fail to value how much the in-between can change us. I would say can ripen us. Throughout time, wise traditions have seen the spiritual meaning in these in-between spaces. Leslie writes, I realized that my focus on finding the right path had prevented her from seeing that many good paths lay ahead. The question wasn't about which one was right, but which one spoke to the heart. And that is the difference between discernment and decision-making. And that's why I have no answers for you, because some days I can barely, through the noise, hear what my own heart is asking me to discern, what is mine to do. So this liminal space that's represented in the fire rituals of Beltane, in the labyrinth spiraling journey in and then back out, and not hurrying love's workings, and taking time for discerning where our heart is leading us as we alchemize our experiences, our stories into the gold of stories that heal instead of harm, that connect us to each other, that open us to the gift of dwelling in community, of dwelling with God within, God everywhere present, and in that way, helping to grow this world that we long to see, a world of mercy and forgiveness and justice and freedom, of safety, a place where all of creation thrives in the way that all of creation was designed to do. Then we will discover fire anew, as Teilhard de Chardin says. But I'll close with one of my favorites, John O'Donohue, from a poem in praise of fire. Let us praise the grace and risk of fire. In the name of the fire, the flame, and the light, praise the pure presence of fire that burns from within, without thought of time. As fire cleanses dross, may the flame of passion burn away all that is false. As short as the time from spark to flame, so brief may the distance be between heart and being. May we discover beneath our fear embers of anger to kindle justice. May courage cause our lives to flame in the name of the fire and the flame and the light. Tend the sacred in your own heart, in your own yard, in your own community. Tend the sacred in the stories that you tell, in the story that you are. And tend that flame of love that you carry always, always. And so it is. Amen.